Hello and welcome to the first episode of The Reflection. I am Mwesigo Kerry Howard, and today we have the pleasure of having a dialogue with Mr. Balondemu David, a global corporate lawyer and senior counsel, to discuss his journey to becoming a known legal practitioner and the challenges he faced early on in his career. Thank you. And thank you for joining us today, Castle Balondemu.
Good morning to you.
Can you tell us about your journey to becoming a global corporate counsel and senior lawyer?
It's quite interesting, my journey to becoming a global and senior. Of course, when you talk of senior means you have been in practice for some time and probably you have excelled in terms of legal accomplishments. When you go global corporate is a brand. That's my brand. Because as a lawyer, when I left the law school, I sat by myself and I said, what is the missing link in the legal profession? Of course, the training that we undergo at the Law Development Center is basically one-sided. That is plaintiff, then defense. Meaning we are likely trained to become courtroom lawyers. The other aspect of transaction lawyers is so limited and it hasn't been embraced in our country, Uganda. Now, apparently we are I'm using the word over, 7,000 lawyers with a population of about 44 million people. But with a limited middle class, what does that mean? It means that people who consume legal services are very few. The other lay people who may want the legal services do not have the capacity to procure them. So in my mind, I said the best way is to look at another area of law that has not been tapped, which is global. What do I mean? The world is huge. Countries day in, day out are signing bilateral agreements, trade agreements. They want to trade. But there is the other aspect of where do I get the service? One, lawyers don't advertise themselves. But how will a person in Switzerland procure services of a good lawyer in Uganda or in Africa? Apparently, there is a state in the United States called Pennsylvania. It is a state that produces chocolates. And the ingredient in making chocolate is cocoa. They're looking for cocoa world over. Now, how can they find someone to supply them cocoa and probably seal agreements? So in my mind, using that as an example, I enrolled or I subscribed to Alibaba, to TradeLink, to Amazon. I'm in the gold class for services, not for trade, but for services. So every time the traders, every time the business people, every time the international people are looking for lawyers to contact in Africa, my name comes first. So as a result, I am contacted for due diligence. I am contacted for agreements, transaction agreements. Generally, I'm a transaction advisor. I don't sit. Apparently, I'm traveling this afternoon to Nairobi to meet business people who are coming from South Africa and others from Dubai to seal a construction agreement. So ideally, with that background, with that branding, there is a concept in economics called the multiplier. You help one successfully, he informs the other, then it becomes what? A multiplier effect. And that is how I became a global corporate attorney.
Could you talk us through when you became first interested in law and what motivated you to pursue a career in this field?
You know, life is a fantasy. What you can't see, you can't become. I used to attend court in Uganda, where I grew up. The most interesting case that I attended or where I picked interest to become a lawyer was a treason case. It was involving prominent personalities in eastern Uganda who had formed a rebel group. I think it was called Force Obote Back Again. And these guys were arrested. Now, during trial, they hired lawyers, and majority of these lawyers were coming from Kampala. But the way they could style up, the way they could submit in court, it was so amazing that I picked and developed interest to become one of them. Generally, legal profession is exciting. It gives one, I'll call it an immeasurable respect in society. The feeling that a client has appeared with a lawyer gives the client some comfort. I have come with my lawyer. The feeling that you are a lawyer gives you some respect, natural respect from the community. I love being respected and I love passing off big. So essentially, I looked for a profession that would suit in my category of life, and that is law. And that's where I am. And I feel good about it.
Yes. Could you talk us through some of the challenges you faced earlier on in your career and how you overcame them?
My biggest challenge was the issues I had at Law Development Center.
Yes, sir.
Just imagine an institution of that caliber trains you, graduates you, you go to the field, start work, and 4 years down the road, they recall you that they issued your certificate in error, that after conducting a forensic audit. Now, one wonders, at what stage does a student get in contact with his examination script? At the time of doing the exam, period. So, if you made your own errors where I wasn't involved, why would I be penalized? It was a very traumatizing situation, but luckily enough, I applied logic and law. I took them to court and I won, and I was very happy. I set a precedent. Actually, my case is a locus classicus in judicial review. It is being used all over Africa and beyond. So essentially, the lawyerism or the lawyer in me, you are always able to overcome situations because where you cannot apply law, you can apply logic. But even the logic comes because of the legal knowledge that you acquired in law school.
So, would you consider that among your greatest achievements?
To become a lawyer. And also another, to become a successful lawyer.
Yes.
It is strange. You find some lawyers, the poor lawyers, world over, but even in Uganda. But personally, my ability to overcome poverty, I consider it a very big achievement. It's a very, very, very big achievement. It is not easy to kick poverty out of your way. More so, some of us who are coming from very humble backgrounds.
How do you balance the demands of your legal practice with other responsibilities and interests?
Of course, I set goals. What do I want in life? I want good life. What do I want for my children? Good education and generally good life. I don't want them to go through the experience that I've gone through. So my priority is work. I do my work meticulously to satisfy my clients. And at the end of the day, I am rewarded handsomely. Now, once I get my reward, I am able to balance. I spend some leisure. I spend time with my family. I set time for work, time for leisure, time for family, and of course, time for friends, for purposes of networking, because you must keep it flowing. If you lose out touch with colleagues, certainly you lose out on current affairs, you lose out on the network of friends, and generally you will also lose out on the feeding, because largely we get work through referrals. So you must keep in touch with your own people.
How are you able to stay up to date with these changes and this development in the field?
Number one, I read a lot. I follow global proceedings, either on CNN, Al Jazeera, Newmark, those international televisions. I keep viewing them and I pick one thing at a time. I follow local proceedings in parliament, like here, even in other parliaments. And of course, meeting colleagues in conversations. Where need be, where at times I'm invited for workshops, seminars, to present papers. It enables me to do research. And every time I'm presenting, I also get the opportunity of hear other presenters. And I get enough knowledge in this particular aspect.
So could you talk us through any particularly challenging case that you worked on and what you learned from that experience?
I represented a client who was a personal friend of mine. He was a doctor. Now, this was a murder case. A 7-year, I think 9-year-old kid had been kidnapped and killed, but by a witch doctor. I'm told my client participated. So eventually my client was arrested. Now, I pursued police to secure his release. Police told me, give us time, we are investigating. You are also a parent. There is a kid who is missing, who has been kidnapped, and your client, information we are getting, participated. So give us time. Now, on the fateful day, I was invited after my client and the other suspects were thoroughly beaten by police, thoroughly beaten, tortured, to the extent that they made disclosures. They called me, counsel, please come, we go together. We went to Lunguja. Reaching Lunguja, we entered the bush, and the witch doctor pointed at a spot where he had buried the kid, strangled the kid, buried, for ritual sacrifice. Now when they removed the body, my God, I was the first to faint. The lawyer representing one of the accused persons. So it was so emotional that I realized I could not handle that angle of criminal law. Now, the televisions that we had gone with were focusing on the lawyer representing the accused person who was the first event. It was so traumatizing that since then, I have never practiced the aspect of criminal law. I realized that is not my field. That was the most challenging case. I am happy. I don't practice criminal. I am a commercial person. I do commercial transactions, and I enjoy the practice.
Could you expand on your other strengths that you consider to have helped you arise in this whole field?
For a lawyer, the fact that we don't advertise, but every moment you get chance to speak to the audience, you must speak with pomp, with facts, with figures, well researched, and your ability to be audible and you draw the point closer.
Yes, sir.
You get admirers secretly and individually, and at the end of the day, people keep engaging you for your services because of what you presented.
What advice do you have for a young lawyer who is considering a career in this field?
For young people, a number of things. Number one, you must pick interest in what you want to do. You must create love for it. Now, if you don't fall in love with your work, if you don't fall in love with your office, if you don't fall in love with your workmates, you cannot succeed in that particular profession. You always be negative. And of course, having big visions, what I said, fantasy. Whatever you cannot see in life, you will never become. If you don't see yourself as a successful lawyer, you will not be successful. Then also, they must be ready to take on some risks, calculated risks. You cannot play safe all the time. You must be ready to engage in risks as long as you are not committing a crime like a robbery, like a murder, treason, embezzlement, but they're just some normal risks that can make you go through life and you succeed.
Thank you very much, sir. I really do appreciate you taking the time to have this interview with us.